Since the dawn of civilization, the powerful have conspired to twist the course of history to suit their own designs. Like puppeteers, a few shadowy figures could still be pulling the strings of destiny for billions. Those who cry conspiracy are usually mocked at, for sometimes the truth is so obvious it goes unnoticed. Are those merely paranoid fantasies cooked up to feed the appetite of paperback readers and web surfers, but which bear no relation to reality? Or are we living out some perfectly executed plan? Wars, revolutions, social movements, terrorist attacks. Everything is given an official explanation, but perhaps nothing is what it seems to be. Let's dare to unveil the incredible world of secret societies.
The world is flooded with secret societies. Their members range from unknown citizens and eccentrics to top executives in the most important companies, banks, and even governments. Some have become famous in recent years because of the boom in conspiracy literature. 3 of them in particular in recent years have caught the public eye: Skull and Bones, the Bilderberg Group, and the Council on Foreign Relations, or the CFR. To their members, these are nothing but innocent fraternities or simple think tanks. To their critics, parallel world governments. As always, the truth lies somewhere in between. The United States of America is the most powerful country in the world, the single remaining superpower that dictates the global agenda. But ironically, the political system of this champion of democracy was built under the guidance of mysterious fraternities and organizations we know little or nothing about.
Secret societies have actively participated in the construction of the American governmental system. Freemasonry, to name just one society, left its imprint on the Declaration of Independence, the American Constitution, and on dozens of national symbols, from the Great Seal of the US to the dollar bill. This American passion for secrets, rituals, and exclusive clubs has been particularly strong in its universities, where the fraternity system was developed. The fraternities, or frats as they're most commonly referred to, are student associations with academic and philanthropic goals. However, they also abound in codes of silence and initiation rites, very similar to those found in Freemasonry and other secret societies. The first ever recorded frats were the Flat Hat Club and the Phi Beta Kappa, both founded at Yale University.
Also in Yale, one of the most enigmatic and most notorious fraternities in the world arose, one that has always been favored by the cream of American society. Its name, Skull and Bones.
Skull and Bones was founded in 1832. Its original name was the Eulogian Club. Its creator was a merchant named William Huntington Russell, owner of Russell and Company, a transport company which was rumoured to smuggle opium into China during the Opium Wars. The name Skull and Bones probably comes from a curious tradition. During their meetings in the campus chapel at Yale, the society used to hang a skull and 2 crossed shin bones upon the door, as a warning that they should not be disturbed. The society was also known as the Order of Death, Cooperation Star, or simply the Order.
In 1856, 24 years after its foundation, the Order was granted an important plot of land on the university campus and built its official headquarters there. It is a windowless stone construction that can still be seen today. They call it the Tomb.
The tomb has a dark, labyrinth-like layout. that spans 3 floors and an attic. It compromises a number of halls and secret cabinets, chambers with mannequins in full armour, candlesticks, old photos, flags and manuscripts, and a sinister collection of bones, supposedly belonging to historical figures, including the skulls of Mexican revolutionary Pancho Villa and the Indian chief Geronimo, and even that of Panamanian dictator General Omar Torrijos. In the keep of the labyrinth, there is a vault with the enigmatic number 322 on the door. Inside, there are just 2 chairs and a table. This was where the candidates are said to meet Madame, a skeleton that is supposed to be that of Madame Pompadour.
Their passion for bones and skulls could be considered in bad, albeit innocent taste. However, a much more serious accusation hangs over the Brotherhood of Death. It's sympathy for the Nazis.
Critics of Skull and Bones insist that the society is not originally American, but rather an offshoot of some German right-wing order. This could well be true. Its founder, William Russell, did indeed live for some time in Germany before attending to his senior year at Yale. And it was actually on returning to the USA that he established the fraternity. Always according to its critics, the number 322, the order's identifying number, hides a coded message. The 32 represents the year of its foundation, 1832, and the additional 2 stands for the fact that it's the second chapter within an international order. Alexandra Robbins, a Yale graduate and author of a book on the subject, stated that the society owns a valuable collection of Nazi objects and memorabilia, and eats its dinners off Hitler's private silver service. A large part of their liturgy is written in German. Who was the fool? Who was the wise man, beggar or king? Whether poor or rich, all's the same in death.
A sizable part of the American military-industrial complex of the early 20th century collaborated with the Nazi regime in Germany, contributing immensely to their rise to power. This historical fact is unknown to most people even today. Also unknown is the strong involvement of bonesmen in the pre-war German-American relations. But history keeps its own records, and the past always returns to haunt us.
In 1930, Prescott Sheldon Bush, father of President George H. and grandfather of President George W., a member of the Skull and Bones class of 1917, and president of the Union Banking Corporation, engaged in a number of profitable business deals with Fritz Thyssen, the German steel tycoon who supplied Hitler's war machine. The UBC was closed by President Truman during the Second World War under the Trading with the Enemy Act. In other words, for doing business with the Nazis. Apart from Prescott Bush, several other directors of the Union Banking Corporation in New York were also 1917 bonesmen, including E. Roland Harriman and Ellery Sedgwick James. In 1938, Bush, by then executive associate of Brown Brothers Harriman, issued a loan to Hitler's Germany to enable the latter to import American Standard Oil fuel.
In 1941, the year the United States entered the war against the Third Reich, Standard Oil, which belonged to Rockefellers, bonesmen themselves, had 6 oil tankers sailing under Panamanian flags and manned by German crews. These vessels carried fuel from their American refineries to the Canary Islands, where their German submarines were being refueled. In the meantime, Allied troops were losing their lives on European battlefields.
Investigator Anthony Sutton claims that Skull and Bones is not at all an American society, but a branch of a foreign secret society. According to this expert, it is one of the reasons why secrecy in the order is so vital.
However, the list of its members is a true who's who of American society. Many of these influential personalities are advocates of the American way of life.
Skull and Bones membership certainly has its privileges. At least 3 American presidents were or are Bonesmen. George W. Bush, his father George H. Bush, and William Taft. The proposition that this small club of the well-to-do pulls the strings of American power, and through it those of the whole world, by placing its associates in key power positions, is supported by substantial evidence. The elections of 2004 saw the almost impossible come true. Both the Republican candidate George W. Bush and his Democrat rival John F. Kerry were members of Skull and Bones. That's to say, prior to running as representatives of parties that supposedly propound opposite political visions, they had both sworn allegiance to the same mysterious principles. And what's worse, they share secrets that are not known to their own constituents.
The million-dollar question for American citizens and the world as a whole is, do Bonesmen put their frat fidelity above that of their civic responsibilities? As the BCCI case clearly shows, the answer is undeniably yes.
By the end of the 1980s, the scandal concerning the Bank of Commerce and Credit International was making the headlines. The BCCI was accused of laundering drug money and financing terrorist operations. The scandal tarnished the reputation of the US government, since the bank operated freely in America and was a regular contributor to political campaigns. The administration of Bonesman George H. Bush blocked the investigation, which had in any case been entrusted to a Senate commission chaired by Bonesman John Kerry. The BCCI was absorbed by more respectable banks, and the subject was never revived.
Who runs Skull and Bones? Or to what point are Bonesmen able to influence the decisions of fellow members? Perhaps by looking into their initiation rituals, we will be able to have some idea of what kind of power the society holds over its brethren, whether they are industry leaders, intellectuals, or politicians, and speculate how they use that power should the need arise.
Each year, only 15 students entering their senior year at the University of Yale are admitted. The candidates must have been tapped by those senior classmen of Yale University who make up the current membership. The criterion for selection also includes the candidate's potential to increase the power and prestige of the society. 2 votes against the candidate are enough for him to be rejected. During their initiation, candidates must recount all their sexual exploits. Finally, they are expected to perform various oaths, kiss some feet, and drink blood. They then have to lie naked in a coffin, and, after masturbating in full view of the others, swear to never reveal their membership of the order. The candidates are then introduced to their future companions, who wear masks for the occasion. Uncle Toby, the Knights, the Small Devil, Don Quixote, and the Pope. Their ceremony ends with a grand party that lasts for hours.
To imagine presidents of the United States in this situation is highly disturbing, but even more distressing is to realize that the candidate is now subject to blackmail. All the brethren have witnessed the humiliation of the candidate. Each one has spoken of his darkest secrets. Nobody now feels he can break the pact of silence with the order. As of that moment, betrayal is highly unlikely.
The government of the world's only superpower is packed with Bonesmen. George W. Bush named 11 Bonesmen officials in his first government. Add to this various senators, congressmen, and chief justices, directors of the CIA, the Federal Reserve, and directors of banks such as J.P. Morgan Chase and Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. The American media is little different. Among others, Time, and Newsweek magazines, in theory competitors, were both founded by Bonesmen. The oldest and most influential families also belong to this select club. Bush, Bundy, Harriman, Lord, Phelps, Rockefeller, Taft, Whitney. All of them have undergone the odd ritual of initiation. All have spilled their darkest secrets. All have been ritually humiliated in front of their peers. And all of them owe loyalty to the order. It is estimated that there are some 800 Bonesmen alive today, around half of them active and in key positions in the American economy and political establishment.
There are plenty of reasons to be shocked just by what we have learned so far. This is a secret society founded by an alleged drug lord that counts among its members people who have financed the Nazis. Their members meet in a bunker supposedly full of stolen skeletons, and among its brethren we find no less than the president of the most powerful country on earth, and also his main political contender. And Skull and Bones is not the only secret society that appears to be pulling the strings of world power. There are at least 2 other organizations who are suspected of foul play, ranging from economic manipulation to attempting to achieve world control. They are the Bilderberg Group and the mysterious Council of Foreign Relations.
Skull and Bones has seen its power grow steadily since its foundation in 1832. In spite of its alleged early links to drug trafficking and Nazism, most of its known members are respected, influential politicians and businessmen. But Skull and Bones is not the only secret society whose influence reaches the highest ranks of power. There are more.
One of the organizations most suspected of pulling the strings of world power behind the facade of an altruistic organization is the CFR, or Council on Foreign Relations. They're also hidden away here in Washington, D.C., on the 7th floor of this building. They define themselves as a non-partisan resource for information and analysis. That is to say, an innocent think tank. But are they what they say they are? The answer to this question may hold the key to understanding the true origin of many events that happen to us every day and seem to be a result of our own free will.
The Council of Foreign Relations was founded during the First World War, when a university fraternity presented President Woodrow Wilson with a set of proposals that detailed options to reinforce world democracy when Kaiser Wilhelm II was eventually defeated. The proposals were backed by Colonel Edward Mandell House, advisor to President Wilson. Wilson presented the project to Congress in January 1918, where it was approved. And the CFR was officially founded in 1921. Its first sponsors were members of the most powerful families in the US: Rockefeller, Mellon, Harriman, Schiff, Kuhn, Loeb, and Carnegie. It was also backed by important foreign citizens, including multimillionaire South African colonizer Sir Cecil Rhodes, and European bankers Warburg and Rothschild.
The CFR makes no secret of who their members are or their activities. At least that's how it seems. Its headquarters are on Park Avenue and 68th Street in New York City. Its reports can be freely downloaded from the internet, where the CFR publishes a full web page at www.cfr.org. It runs a newspaper that is the most prestigious political analysis journal in the United States, Foreign Affairs. It seems they have nothing to hide. However, its critics say that it's nothing more than a facade, that the CFR is a dangerous organization, set on achieving full global control through the levers of economy and finance. In other words, they're like executives out to privatize world power.
According to its critics, the domination strategy of the CFR is to control both sides of conflicts, and its ultimate goal, the creation of a private world government that would run countries as corporations. To achieve this, it would first have to erode the political structures of all sovereign states. Then it would have to foster worldwide socio-cultural standardization. And finally, it would have to impose a globalized financial system that it could control. Critics add that all of this would be achieved by provoking global conflicts that would keep the masses united against real or imaginary common enemies. Any similarity with reality is surely pure coincidence.
But can an organisation, no matter how hard it tries to manipulate the world, actually achieve this? If so, how much power would it need to amass?
To be allowed to join the select 4,200 members the CFR has today, it is mandatory to be American, or to be about to obtain American citizenship. The Council is loaded with top executives of financial institutions, powerful industry leaders, and mass media executives. Academics and scholars, high-ranking military personnel, politicians, public officers, deans of universities, and research centres are also welcome.
Their reports identify threats, opportunities, strengths and weaknesses, and then offer operational, tactical and strategic planning in all the spheres of interest to the United States. The question is this for the better or worse? The list of its most prominent members is a conspiracy theorist's dream come true.
Among CFR's most renowned members are David Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, Bill Clinton, former Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, Hungarian-American billionaire George Soros, Supreme Court Judge Stephen Breyer, Low CBS Network's President Lawrence A. Tisch, former U.S. Secretary of State General Colin Powell, General Electric's former Chairman and CEO Jack Welch, current U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice, W. Thomas Johnson, President of CNN, and Katharine Graham, President of the Washington Post, Newsweek, International Herald Tribune Group. That's not to mention Alan Welsh Dulles, founding father of the CIA, and banker Paul Moritz Warburg, who was born in Germany and emigrated to the United States, where in 1913 he drew up and promoted the legislation that would create the Federal Reserve Bank. This is the American Central Bank, whose capital is not public, as would normally be expected, but is instead in the hands of private banks.
The Federal Reserve is not the only institution related to the CFR. The International Monetary Fund behind me and the World Bank close by were both created by CFR members. These three organisations control most of the world's capital, as well as distribution and aid policies. That is to say, they decide who wins and who loses.
Both the IMF and the World Bank have come in for some heavy criticism over many years for their lousy management of world crises, when instead of acting like last resort moneylenders, as their mission states, they became involved in dictating the macroeconomic policies of deeply indebted nations, drowning them in more and more debt. This policy had catastrophic results for countries such as Brazil, Argentina, Turkey, and Mexico. Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel laureate for economics, has repeatedly attacked the performance of the fund, suggesting that it was the true cause of many of the aforementioned crises. This cannot be brushed off as hearsay, since Stiglitz was chief economist and senior vice president of the World Bank from 1997 to 2000. In other words, an insider.
If we observe how the price of medical supplies generates gigantic profits for those who produce them, and at the same time kill millions of people who cannot afford to buy them, if we stop to think about the irreparable damage that multinational corporations carry out in the so-called third world countries, if we study the mechanisms of usurious loans of the world banking system that cyclically provoke crises that sink entire countries below the poverty line, it's worth asking, is economic war more effective than conventional war when it comes to achieving world power? Are the members of the CFR those responsible for carrying it out? Or is it all nothing but a natural byproduct of the capitalist system?
The idea of a world dominated by private corporations, led by the CFR, might sound nonsensical. These corporations have a joint turnover that is almost twice the GDP of the United States, and employ more than 25 million people in the United States alone. Their power is surely already strong enough to twist some political arms worldwide. Perhaps the CFR is just an innocent think tank, like its members say it is. One thing is certain: the undeniable and enormous power wielded by such a group of influential people, for better or for worse.
What other secret societies pull the strings? Or better said, what other societies secretly pull the strings on the world stage?
Most experts agree that one of the traits of contemporary secret societies is that they're no longer guided by ideology, but rather by pure and simple economics. In practice, this means that they use their influence in the corporate world to force entire countries to serve their interests. The average person is completely unaware of how national strategic decisions are taken, and whatever changes his vote may bring about happen only over the very long term, and usually prove to be merely cosmetic.
If there's one secret society that has every characteristic needed to raise suspicion, it's the Bilderberg Group. Surely the most exclusive club on the planet, and perhaps the organisation that really controls the world.
The Bilderberg Group is named after the Bilderberg Hotel in Oosterbeek, Holland, where it first met. Its founders were Joseph Rettinger, a Polish emigre with social democratic ideas, and Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands. The annual meetings that it has held since then have been regarded as true milestones in international politics. For the occasion, each country sends two guests, one of whom is conservative, the other liberal. According to Prince Bernhard, the group was created as an entity destined to fortify the North Atlantic Unit, to stop Soviet expansionism, and to promote cooperation and the economic development of the countries of the West.
Sometimes to better understand an organisation, you need to know more about the people who work for it. There are two interesting facts that question the integrity of the founder of the Bilderberg Group. Firstly, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands was an active member of Hitler's SS in his youth. Second, he had to stop heading the meetings in 1976 after being involved in the Lockheed scandal related to the purchase of fighter jets. On that occasion, Lockheed was found to have bribed Japanese, Dutch and Italian officers.
The Nazi background of Prince Bernhard did not stop the Bilderberg Group from being supported by Social Democrats, or by the Rothschild Bank, or the Rockefellers, both of Jewish origin. Other early sponsors included the Wallenbergs, owners of Electrolux and Ericsson in Sweden. All of them still actively participate in the annual general meetings of the group, either directly or through their representatives.
The only thing that this confirms is that when it comes to making decisions that will affect the world, ideology doesn't really play that much of a role. After all, business is business.
The venue, the agenda, and the participants are not secret. What remains undisclosed, however, are the topics discussed. since the meeting is held behind closed doors, and no detailed reports are published. The conference takes place during a weekend in May, and lasts 3 full days, usually a few weeks before the G8's annual meeting. A fleet of black limousines drives the guests to a luxury hotel or palace of choice. Security is tight and includes members of the attending country's secret services.
Their guests include bankers, top businessmen and media moguls, as well as European and American politicians and leaders. When looking at the meetings, we can get some idea of how the nations of the future will be. Economic power groups owning both the world's capital and the means for production in an overpopulated planet, sick with poverty and short on natural resources.
Past and present participants of the Bilderberg Group include the CEOs of France Telecom, Coca-Cola, Danone, Heineken, JP Morgan Chase, high-ranking British, American and European officials and cabinet members, and the editors of newspapers such as El País, La Repubblica, Le Figaro, the New York Times, Die Zeit, and the Wall Street Journal, among others.
What should we think when meetings like these have among their participants the owners of media giants and still their secret agenda goes unreported? Where does their loyalty lie? With their audience or with this secret society of the rich and powerful?
The most popular Bilderberg conspiracy theory states that the group is a test lab for policies and decisions that countries and powerful corporations will later implement. According to this theory, the guests exchange their views on the proposals made by the most powerful countries. Thus, it is possible to predict how these countries will react in real life and fine-tune the ensuing courses of action. In defense of the group, their most recent organizer, Viscount Etienne d'Avignon, has been clear. I don't think that we are a global ruling class, because I don't think a global ruling class exists, he said. I simply think that it's people who have influence, interested in speaking to other people who have influence. And he added, when people say, this is a secret government of the world, I say that if we were a secret government of the world, we should be bloody ashamed of ourselves.
The Bilderberg agenda, according to its own press releases, is the world agenda. Whether its members can then carry it out or not is open to discussion.
The items on the Bilderberg agenda vary very little from meeting to meeting. A state of the world analysis, discussions on security in the West, debates on economic and political trends in the developed countries, as well as discussions on nuclear energy, and lately, biotechnology. Other famous guests at the group's meetings have included Giovanni Agnelli, then president of Italy's Fiat auto giant, and Henry Kissinger. Bill Clinton, Tony Blair, and Angela Merkel attended before assuming public office, as did Kofi Annan, the former Secretary General of the UN. Annan was married to Raoul Wallenberg's niece. Wallenberg, as we stated before, is the patriarch of the powerful Swedish family that has supported the group from its very beginning. Other participants have included Henry Ford II, Georges Pompidou, Helmut Schmidt, and Baron Edmund de Rothschild, together with the father of the American atomic bomb, J. Robert Oppenheimer. More names follow: Donald Rumsfeld, Alan Greenspan, George Soros, David Rockefeller, Queen Beatrice of the Netherlands, and US Senator and former presidential candidate, John Kerry. The list, while incomplete, represents the greatest amount of economic and political power ever concentrated in one single organization.
Curiously enough, there are no disloyal Bilderbergs. Nobody has broken the silence, and if they do speak out, they do so many years after attending the meetings of the group, by which time it is already too late to change events. For many, these brief statements are proof that the suspicions about the group are staggeringly true.
Years after participating in a Bilderberg meeting, George McGee, former United States ambassador to Germany, said that the Treaty of Rome that created the European Common Market was born in the Bilderberg meetings. Jack Schenkman, chairman of Amalgamated Bank and also a Bilderberg member, said in 1996, the idea of a common European currency was discussed a great many years before it came about. We also discussed the possibility of the United States re-establishing diplomatic relations with China before President Nixon actually did it.
One naturally wants to dismiss conspiracy theories, but it was David Rockefeller himself, a member of Skull and Bones, CFR and the Bilderberg Group, who said something that will be remembered as one of the most brutal confessions ever made.
Something must replace governments. And it seems to me that private power is the adequate entity to do it. Whether or not secret societies control the world is open to discussion. What is clearly undeniable is that the most powerful people in the world are indeed accustomed to belonging to one secret society or another. Currently, there are 3 societies that seem to have a monopoly on influencing global policy from behind the scenes. Skull and Bones, the Council of Foreign Relations, and the Bilderberg Group. According to their critics, they're not different organizations, but the 3 heads of the same monster that is dead set on dominating the world through control of labor, capital, and land.
But there is a 4th organization that conspiracy theorists keep bringing up. In contrast to the other 3, its activities are public and nothing happens behind closed doors. However, that does not seem to stop the accusations against it. It's known as the Trilateral Commission.
In 1973, David Rockefeller, also a member of the CFR, requested that his fellow Bilderberg members include Japanese representatives in the group, but the idea was turned down. He then created the Trilateral Commission, which compromises annual private meetings of some 350 people. Again, top businessmen and corporation executives, media moguls, politicians, and non-governmental organizations. But this time, including the Japanese. The idea was to create a trialogue involving Asia, America, and Europe. US President Jimmy Carter was present at several of its meetings.
But the Trilateral is not only criticized by sensationalist authors. One of the most striking accusations came from Barry Goldwater, former Democratic American senator and presidential candidate, who described it in words that would make even the most paranoid person blush.
What the Trilateral is really up to is the creation of a world economic power, exceeding the political government of the nations involved. As managers and creators of the system, they will govern the world.
In the 1980s, it was not the left wing, but the right wing that lashed out at them. The American Legion, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and the ultra-conservative John Birch Society denounced the Trilateral Commission and wanted Congress to investigate it. But their demands died, buried in red tape.
During the 1980 presidential campaign, Ronald Reagan attacked Jimmy Carter by saying that there were 19 trilateralists, including Carter himself, in the administration. Reagan pledged that if he were elected president, he would not stop until he had exposed all of the secrets of the Trilateral Commission. But when Reagan finally became president, he included in his government 28 members of the CFR, 10 Bilderbergers, and at least 10 trilateralists. His vice president was none other than trilateralist George H. Bush.
At this point, we must face one of the greatest mysteries surrounding secret societies, because the same names appear time and time again. Conservative and liberal, Democrats and Republicans, Nazi sympathizers and social democrats all seem to live under the same roof in the pursuit of a common goal. Although they seem to have radically opposing views, in reality, they obviously share some of the same interests. The only possible explanation for this is that an establishment actually exists within the establishment.
Perhaps that is what President George H. Bush was talking about when, after the Gulf War in 1991, he spoke of a new world order.
What is at stake is more than one small country. It is a big idea, a new world order, where diverse nations are drawn together in common cause to achieve the universal aspirations of mankind.
There are just too many coincidences to ignore, too many signs that suggest something is terribly wrong. After all, if we ourselves had that much power, money, and access to classified information, who could say we would not also use it for our own benefit?
If we follow the course of history, since the Industrial Revolution, we will see a fascinating sequence of events unfolding that seem to prove the conspiracy theory, or at least provide major arguments for it. First, the ever-increasing concentration of cash and other resources in a few private hands, such as banks and gigantic multinational corporations. Corporations whose revenues are equivalent to the GDPs of entire countries, and whose mere survival demands more and more profits year after year, no matter the social cost. Second, the creation of public, multilateral control organizations that are actually nothing but the public arm of powerful private interests. These organizations include the American Federal Reserve, the World Bank, and the IMF. Third, the undeniable advance of the process known as privatization. That is, taking non-renewable natural resources, communication infrastructures, heavy industries, as well as defense, health, and banking systems, out of the hands of the people and delivering them into the clutches of profit-hungry private corporations. Fourth, the phenomenon of cultural and financial globalization, that in truth amounts to little more than the imposition of a dominant cultural and economic system upon those of peripheral countries. Fifth, the creation of worldwide conflicts and stereotypical enemies to manipulate public opinion and destroy any possibility of discussion or dissent, leading to the actual loss of many of the most elementary democratic rights. The US Patriot Act of 2001 is a good example of this. When panic attacks, people tend to accept more and more control. Finally, and most interesting of all, that almost all of the key players of these events, those who are really taking the decisions and hold the true political and economic reins of the West, by being in command of its capital, armed forces, or even votes, are coincidentally grouped in just a few societies that meet behind closed doors.
Are Skull and Bones, the CFR, the Bilderberg Group, and the Trilateral Commission the cause or the consequence? Does membership mean enjoying certain privileges, or is it that only those who enjoy certain privileges can become members? Does it really matter? Just look around and draw your own conclusions. Perhaps it's time to understand that nothing is a coincidence, that events are all interrelated and are always serving a higher power, that though hard to see, is in plain view to us all, if only we know where to look. Otherwise, while believing we are masters of our own destiny, we will be merely puppets in a play controlled by the sinister hands of secret societies.
Since the dawn of civilization, the powerful have conspired to twist the course of history to suit their own designs. Like puppeteers, a few shadowy figures could still be pulling the strings of destiny for billions. Those who cry conspiracy are usually mocked at For sometimes the truth is so obvious, it goes unnoticed. Are those merely paranoid fantasies cooked up to feed the appetite of paperback readers and web surfers, but which bear no relation to reality? Or are we living out some perfectly executed plan? Wars, revolutions, social movements, terrorist attacks. Everything is given an official explanation. But perhaps nothing is what it seems to be. Let's dare to unveil the incredible world of secret societies.
Freemasonry, mother of all secret societies, perhaps the most suspected and persecuted organization of all time. And this in spite of the fact that there are few, very few people who truly know what it's all about. Is it really, as its critics say, the hidden power behind the most important world events? Or is it, as we can see today, a slightly decadent social club with childish rituals? How did this antique secret society that still boasts more than 6 million brethren get started? What are its real objectives? How has it influenced world events for more than 12 centuries? And more important still, how is it influencing them today? Freemasonry defines itself as an innocent fraternity whose primary objectives is to seek the welfare of humanity through the spiritual elevation of its members. But for its critics, it's just a gigantic pyramid of manipulators with the secret objective of world domination, with unwritten codes of silence and cooperation reminiscent of the mafia. So who's right?
A swift perusal of the history of Freemasonry brings to light certain disquieting characteristics. Its impenetrable secrecy, the severity of the penalties for those who break their oaths, the general public's ignorance of its true reach, influence, and real purposes, and most disturbing of all, its obvious participation in many of the key events that have changed the course of history over the last few centuries.
Secret rituals, obscure symbolism, mysterious objectives, qualities made an easy target, mainly by its arch-enemy, the Roman Catholic Church. And one wonders, are these real reasons to fear Freemasonry? Or is it all just a matter of groundless accusations, mere incomprehension and prejudice against enlightenment? Why do the Freemasons still maintain such secrecy if they have nothing to hide? So how did it all begin?
The origins of Freemasonry go back to the 7th century, when it was founded as a guild of builders, bricklayers and stonemasons, who tried to keep secret their technical knowledge in order to protect their livelihoods. These masons were not the construction workers we might picture today, but technical and artistic masters that could undertake the most prestigious constructions at a time when building technology was limited to a set square, a plumb line, and little else.
The original Masons built cathedrals and castles that endured for centuries, surviving wars, earthquakes, time. To the common people of those times, such technical accomplishments endowed the Masons with almost magical powers, powers that had to be kept secret to outsiders.
Thin columns that still hold graceful, ogival arches with narrow ribs, towers of hitherto unimaginable heights that scrape the heavens and inspire God-fearing veneration, chambers with perfect acoustics and overhanging gargoyles to scare away evil spirits, ratios of strength, beauty, and proportion that even today surprise engineers and mathematicians. The extraordinary knowledge and skills of these men constituted the best-kept secret of all time. The development of projects would take generations to complete, and the accompanying know-how was passed down from father to son, from teacher to apprentice. The full preparation of an apprentice took 7 years and began when he was only 12. After the first 3 years, there was an initiation ritual, and certain codes and symbols were revealed to him. Upon completing the 7th year, he would graduate as a Fellow of the Craft. Only years later would he qualify as a Master Mason.
Freemasonry soon acquired a spiritual and ideological dimension that clashed with the value system of its time. This made it the perfect organization to host ideas considered dangerous, ideas that needed to be kept secret at all costs.
This earliest manifestation of Masonry is known as operative Masonry, since its members were active builders. Though the society was born in the Middle Ages, Masons were inspired by much older secret societies, some dating from pre-Christian times. Secret societies have existed since the dawn of civilization. They were formed in order to preserve and defend knowledge that afforded power, and to transmit and maintain ideas that offended the powers that be, ideas whose free and open expression might have brought down a death sentence upon a person who simply dared to utter them. A good example was the Pythagoreans, who were organized like a secret society. Pythagoras was a philosopher who lived in Greece in the 6th century BC, and his discoveries had immense influence on Masonic thought. Centuries later, Pythagoras' theorem was of great importance to the operative Masons, as it allowed them, for example, to execute perfectly straight angles. Pythagoras was pursued and murdered by his enemies, but his knowledge persisted, and the set square became the emblematic symbol of Freemasonry that is still used to this day.
Operative Masons clearly despised what the clergy had become just a few centuries after the death of Christ. A decadent bunch of sinners too busy looking after their worldly possessions to take time to shepherd the souls of their flock. The same feelings were felt for the oppressing nobility who owned land and life. The irony was that the Masons, ideological antagonists to the persecutory dogmatism of Rome, had in the Catholic Church and in nobility their main client.
The old bas-reliefs and ornamentations of Europe's most famous cathedrals still bear witness to the sharp humour through which the Masons left evidence of their disagreement with and distrust of that omnipresent power. In the church of St. Sebald in Nuremberg, there is a tomb showing a monk and a nun in a pretty compromising position. In the Cathedral of Wurzburg, replicas are found of the famous Joachim and Boaz columns that stood at the entrance of King Solomon's temple. They are fundamental symbols of Masonry, together with Hiram Abiff, the mythological builder of King Solomon's temple, who was murdered because of his refusal to reveal the secret of his art. A genuine, coded Masonic signature.
But the belief that Freemasonry is an atheistic movement solely because of its hatred of the Catholic Church is completely misguided. The Masons simply wanted to have the liberty to worship God in the way they chose, not in the way dictated to them by Rome.
To be accepted into the Brotherhood, every Mason must believe in a unique supreme being, no matter who it is. To accommodate for different beliefs, and in line with their origins as builders, Masons have come to call this being Gao, or Gautu, great architect of the universe. Its symbol, the all-seeing eye, is inspired by the Egyptian eye of Horus. The Regius manuscript on display at the British Museum is an anonymous poem on the subject of moral duties and is dated around 1390. It is the oldest known Masonic document written in poetry and lists 15 commandments, among which can be read, to be honest and speak true, not to steal or protect thieves or murderers, to be wise and strong, and to be able to do all jobs, not to speak evil of the work of other masters, to teach the apprentices that their art is always worthy, to conceal neither falsehoods nor others in sin.
The feudal age came to a close, and the Catholic Church stopped being the Masons' major client. It was then that this original guild of spiritually free bricklayers turned into a powerful and influential secret society, open to all men who wanted to accept its rules and would take an oath to keep its secrets. It was called Freemasonry, or Free and Accepted Masons. Soon it would be the key protagonist in some of the most important events in history. Let's recap. Far from being an ignorant association of superstitious bricklayers, the original operative Masons were upholders of ideals of liberty that naturally brought them into conflict with those who were both their best clients and their oppressors, the Catholic Church and the European monarchies. Over time, they evolved into a powerful secret society that attracted some of the most influential figures in history and came to be known as the Freemasonry, or Free and Accepted Masons, a secret society that still operates today.
The name, Free and Accepted Masons, was born when the original operative Masonry transformed itself into a wider secret society in a period that lasted from the end of the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. Free makes reference to the fact that no slave or bondsman could join, and accepted implies that the member is accepted despite not being a builder.
Though the structure and ceremonial rites of the original Masons has remained shrouded in secrecy, it is known that they were based on the Egyptian liturgy of sacerdotal initiation, the death and resurrection of Osiris, the renunciation of the indifference to a previous life. Above all, Freemasonry expects its brethren to die spiritually and be reborn as new, superior men. Even today, these original rituals are repeated in an almost identical fashion.
First, the profane is led to the chamber of reflection, a room painted black, with a table, a stool and a desk. Upon the table there is a jug of water, some bread and 2 cups, one filled with sulphur, the other with salt. On the walls are the symbols, the sickle, the sand clock, the rooster, and the letters V-I-T-R-I-O-L, which is an acronym for the Latin alchemical phrase Visita interiore, terrae rectificando invienis occultum lapidem. Visit the interior parts of the earth. By rectification thou shalt find the hidden stone. An invitation to an inner search of the depths of the human soul, in silence and meditation. The profane answers the questions: what does man owe to God? What does man owe to himself? What does man owe to others? And he draws his last will. Blindfolded, the candidate is divested of all metallic substances, since metal represents civilization, and stands neither naked nor clothed, and similarly with his right leg uncovered as a sign of humility. His left shoe is removed, also a sign of humility, and a cable tow is placed round his neck as a symbol of what binds him to the profane world. After overcoming the tests, the blindfold is removed and he receives the light. Finally, he takes an oath to the great architect of the universe over the Book of Constitutions. A Bible with a set square and the compass on top of it are also used, because Freemasons do not deny the existence of God. They simply reject ecclesiastical institutions. The oath is written on a paper that is later burned. When he receives the light, the candidate is initiated, and the brethren point at him with swords to invest him with positive energies. In some rites, the initiate also receives a sword to symbolically defend himself, to protect the lodge, to attack his enemies, and, curiously enough, to avenge the murder of the last great master of the Knights Templar, Jacques de Molay.
Freemasonry is organised into smaller groups known as lodges. We have all heard this word 1,000 times over, shrouded in mystery and distrust. The origin of the first lodge is the most intriguing, since it opens the possibility that Freemasonry might be the continuation of the Order of the Knights Templar, and its rituals the means to hide a 1,000-year-old secret, the content and destiny of the Knights' mythical treasure.
The first recognised Masonic lodge in the world was the Kilwinning Lodge, Lodge Number 0, or Mother Lodge of Scotland, and its origin dates back to the year 1140, when the Masons, who were building the neighbouring abbey of Kilwinning, organised themselves into a guild. Scotland has been the epicentre of many events that seem to connect Freemasonry with the Order of the Knights Templar. To understand how, we will need to go back to the First Crusade, when two young noblemen fought side by side to free Jerusalem from the Turks. One, Hugh de Payenne, would become the founder of the Knights Templar. The other, Henry Sinclair, a Scottish knight of Norman descent, would sire a dynasty that centuries later would be of vital importance for the birth of Freemasonry. The Order of the Knights Templar was founded in Jerusalem as a monastic and military order by Hugh de Payennes and 7 other knights after obtaining papal blessing. The Templars excavated the ruins of King Solomon's temple, and legend has it they unearthed a fabulous treasure. Whether or not there is any truth in this legend, the fact is that soon after, they became immensely rich and powerful. Some speculate that they had recovered documents that demonstrated Jesus had left descendants, thus putting the Church of Rome on the rack, who, prompted by extortion or otherwise, granted the Templars enormous benefits. Whatever the case might be, history does tell us that on returning from Jerusalem, Hugh de Payennes visited Scotland, where he established the first oratorium outside the Holy Land, on territory belonging to the Sinclair clan. One legend has it that the Sinclairs, Saint-Clair in French, are Merovingian descendants of an alleged lineage stretching back to Jesus Christ.
We have then a precursor of Scottish Freemasonry fighting side by side with the creator of the Knights Templar. This is the first fact in a sequence of coincidences that has given rise to a good deal of speculation. There are more curious facts.
The Knights Templar became the financiers of monarchs all over Europe, a profitable but dangerous business that eventually sealed their fate. The persecution of the Knights Templar was unleashed in 1307, when Pope Clement VII, pressured by King Philip of France, who was enormously indebted to them, accused them of several heresies, including sodomy, adoration of the devil, Baphomet, and many other mortal sins. The Knights Templar were persecuted, tortured, and their order finally eliminated.
Grand Master Jacques de Molay was imprisoned and tortured for 7 years, after which he was convicted to life imprisonment. Faced with the verdict, de Molay, who was already 70 years old, together with his friend Geoffrey de Charnay, claimed that all their confessions had been obtained under torture and that both they and their knights were innocent. That act of bravery sealed their fate.
On the night of March the 18th, 1314, both were carried to the banks of the River Seine and burnt at the stake. De Molay died facing the Cathedral of Notre Dame, praying, proclaiming his innocence, and cursing both king and pope. But the ambitious King of France could not seize the Templars' wealth. The few knights that fled the massacre apparently carried their mythical treasure with them, and the rest was passed on to the Order of the Hospital, another religious group.
One of the main havens for the surviving Knights Templar was remote Scotland, whose king, Robert the Bruce, had been excommunicated by the Pope. Scotland, the land of Henry Sinclair, fellow adventurer of the first Knight Templar. The saga continues.
In the mid-15th century, a descendant of Henry Sinclair, the Crusader, called William Sinclair, started construction of a chapel in Roslin, to the south of Edinburgh. This chapel, mentioned in the bestseller, The Da Vinci Code, was supposedly built to hide the treasure of the Knights Templar in its vault. While this can't be proved, it is undeniable that the chapel is packed with Masonic and Templar symbols, therefore constituting the first ever site where both Masons and Templars left their imprint. Curiously enough, the tabernacle has the same distribution and dimensions of the third reconstruction of King Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem, the very same one that had been excavated by the Knights Templar. Finally, a direct descendant of the builder of the Chapel of Roslin, also called William Sinclair, would become the first Grand Master of Scottish Freemasonry at Kilwinning Lodge. This Mother Lodge is erected on the same grounds that had been visited by Hugh de Payens 400 years before, that is, on Sinclair land.
How much truth is there in the theory that Freemasonry was born to preserve the secret of the Knights Templar? How closely were these organizations really related? Aren't there Knights Templar names and rituals in the York Rite of Freemasonry? Why Knights Templar and not something else? Let's recall the Mason initiation formula. Visit the interior parts of the earth. By rectification, thou shalt find the hidden stone. The Knights Templar dug for years seeking something hidden. Is it all just a peculiar coincidence?
It is indeed possible that both Freemasonry and the Knights Templar were intimately related from the time of their origins. But it is also plausible that they became related somewhat later, due to a simple ideological affinity, since both societies shared an anti-clerical and anti-monarchical ideology, and they both knew very well what it was like to be persecuted.
Perhaps the mysterious bond between Masons and Knights Templar will never be proven, since those who know Masonic secrets are forbidden to reveal them, for fear of painful torture followed by death. Such is the punishment for those brethren who reveal the secrets of the Lodge.
The oath of the 10th degree of the Scottish Rite is just one of the many examples of the brutality with which Freemasonry condemns its betrayers. It concludes, "And in failure of this my obligation, I consent to have my body opened, perpendicularly, and to be exposed for 8 hours in the open air, that the venomous flies may eat my entrails, my head to be cut off, and put on the highest pinnacle of the world, and I will always be ready to inflict the same punishment on those who shall disclose this degree and break this obligation." An oath that one would think twice about before breaking.
In the 17th century, Freemasonry acquired such importance that it began to make powerful enemies. Its inner circles became tighter and tighter. Its power to influence society grew in proportion to its expansion. Very soon they began to pull the strings of history, strings that perhaps they still pull today. Anti-Catholic, libertarian, conspirational, all kinds of accusations have been laid at the door of Freemasonry. Their particular method of organization and their lexicon packed with mystifying words such as rite, orient, apprentice and master have surely contributed to their reputation.
Freemasonry is an international organization that is subdivided into lodges or independent chapters without a global governing authority. In the hierarchy of Freemasonry, there are 3 degrees which are taken in sequence: apprentice, fellow of the craft, and Master Mason. A lodge that confers all 3 degrees is called a Blue Lodge, or Great Lodge, which constitutes the foundation of Freemasonry. Then there are the so-called appendages, such as the York Rite and the Scottish Rite. To reach this hallowed level, one must have first achieved the 3rd degree, that of Master Freemason. The York and Scottish Rites offer 10 and 33 degrees respectively, with their corresponding rituals and symbols. Another offshoot of Freemasonry is the Rosicrucian order, that does share a common origin, but also incorporates mystical elements, alchemy, and other philosophical principles that set it apart from what we understand by Freemasonry today.
An understanding of the symbols of Freemasonry will surely help us shed some light on its true purpose and ambitions. If we look carefully enough, we will see their imprints in the most unlikely places, reminders that they have been there too, and still are.
Freemason symbols convey ideas of spiritual growth, and many of them are inspired on those of the original Mason builders. The plumb line suggests rectitude, the spirit level, equality, the set square uprightness, virtue, and forthrightness. It is identified with the worshipful master. The compass symbolizes the Masonic ideals of friendship, morality, and fraternal love. When drawing a circle, the central point is the Freemason, and the circle is his world. The Freemason should live according to the principles of friendship, morality, and fraternal love. The trowel symbolizes the mortar that cements the Mason brethren. The 24-inch ruler stands for the 24 hours of the day. The hammer reminds the Masons they should work on shaping and improving their character. The 5-pointed star symbolizes the Supreme Being, and also the 5 points of camaraderie, a secret that cannot be revealed. The white ram blanket represents purity. The slipper reminds Masons of their preparations for the degree. To enter the temple, they must remove their shoes and put on slippers. The point inside the circle with the 2 lines running parallel along it, and the book above it, symbolize the earth, the point, the heavens, the circle, and the 2 solstices, the parallel lines, which are the 2 main festive days of the year for Freemasons. The letter G is God, or Gautu, great architect of the universe, and is an American addition. It was first used in the USA, together with the set square and the compass, in around 1850. A very particular way of shaking hands allows Freemasons to recognize each other in secret.
From what we have learnt so far, the accusations and persecutions that Freemasonry has suffered seem to be due more to the prejudice and dogmatic and dictatorial institutions than to its own wrongdoing. So is Freemasonry just an innocent brotherhood that merely seeks to advance the cause of human progress? Its critics have a very different opinion.
Freemasonry has been accused of practically everything, ranging from constituting an atheist, anti-Catholic, and treacherous mafia, to fostering a global conspiracy to control the world through its secret power networks. The Catholic Church did not hesitate to excommunicate Freemasons. Most European monarchies decided to directly ban the order.
Between 1738 and 1890, the Vatican passed 17 papal bulls condemning Freemasonry and urging its proscription. This did not deter many Christian monarchs from joining their ranks, while others fought them openly.
King James III of Scotland was the first monarch suspected of being a Freemason. The first European sovereign to officially support Freemasonry was the Holy Roman Emperor Francis I, founder of the Royal House of Austria, and curiously enough, a Catholic. The monarchs of Holland, Sweden, Geneva, Zurich, Bern, Bavaria, Austria, Russia, and Prussia outright banned it.
One of the main accusations levied against Freemasonry is that it works through Machiavellian means, even when its ends might be altruistic, as if the end justifies the means. But isn't this the trite self-justification used by every power group? In what way is Freemasonry different from any other powerful organisation?
Some authors believe that prior to the French Revolution, the Duke of Orleans, himself Grand Orient of France, bought all the wheat that he could get his hands on, and either concealed it or sold it beyond the French borders, in order to provoke the famine that led to the French Revolution. However, the Jacobins, who at the time were also being accused of being Masons and Illuminati, closed all the lodges 2 years after their rise to power. Perhaps they did so because they were worried about the great power the Brotherhood seemed to have. And at the time, French Freemasonry boasted around 630 lodges, with some 75,000 followers.
Nor did it help their public image when by the end of the 18th century, the detested Order of the Illuminati of Bavaria had infiltrated most of their lodges. Since then, Freemasonry has been suspected of conspiring to seize world power.
The Order of the Illuminati was created by a Bavarian citizen, Adam Weishaupt, in 1776. Highly opinionated and a true megalomaniac, Weishaupt aspired to dissolve all forms of government, ban religions, abolish private property, and create a new world order under his unified command. He effected infiltration tactics in Freemasonry, and so managed to spread his organization across almost all of Europe, and some even believe North America too. To stop the infection, many monarchs decided to proscribe Freemasonry altogether. The Order of the Illuminati was officially banned in 1790, but its participation in subsequent events is highly likely, and many believe it is still operative today.
In spite of the Illuminati episode, Freemasonry gained prestige and continued to expand its membership. Important historical figures would soon join its ranks.
Learned men, nobles, bourgeoisie, the military. Freemasonry has gained prestige and attracted freethinkers who lurked in the shadows. Their meetings were organized by means of hidden signs. The identity of the masters was only known to those who had come up through the ranks. The result of their actions left practically no traces in history. But their presence was definitely real. Its influence was strongly felt in the Americas, infiltrating the highest circles of civilian and military power. Freemasons played crucial roles in the liberation of both the British and Spanish-American colonies. The USA is perhaps Freemasonry's most outstanding legacy. Its national symbols are loaded with Masonic messages.
A partial list of the most famous Freemasons in history will help us perceive the true importance of this secret society and how it has influenced history.
The banker, Nathan Mayer Rothschild, the musician Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and the German poet Goethe were all Freemasons. Britain was particularly prolific in producing famous Freemasons. English kings George V, William IV, Edward VII and VIII, and George VI. Also English politicians George Canning, Cecil Rhodes and Winston Churchill, the inventor of penicillin, Sir Alexander Fleming, writers Alexander Pope, Edward Gibbon, Sir Walter Scott, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, Rudyard Kipling, plus dozens of the generals, admirals and air marshals. Even actor Peter Sellers was a Freemason. The United States does not lag behind. Most of their founding fathers, judges, congressmen, senators, and generals were Freemasons. Also American presidents Theodore Roosevelt, Franklin D. Roosevelt, Harry Truman, Lyndon B. Johnson, and Gerald Ford. The director of the American nuclear program, Vannevar Bush, the director of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, Henry Ford, and also Steve Wozniak co-founder of Apple Computers, all were Freemasons. In South America, figures like Simon Bolivar, San Martin, and Benito Juarez were also Freemasons. And the list just goes on and on.
The importance and popularity that Freemasonry acquired earned it more bloodthirsty enemies than the Catholic Church. Paradoxically, the bloodiest and most effective persecution launched against Freemasonry came from another excommunicated group, the Bolsheviks.
Freemasonry actually survived the first stages of the Russian Revolution and was tolerated until 1922, when the Fourth International decreed that it was an ideology incompatible with communism. At that point, some lodges were disbanded and others went underground. In 1926, a strange request from Mason Boris Astromov to Joseph Stalin to allow Masonry to operate under official sanction resulted in the arrest, torture, and imprisonment of known Masons. Freemasonry disappeared totally during the remaining years of Soviet rule. Astromov himself was detained, interrogated, and died soon after his release. Freemasonry disappeared, or survived in the shadows. The first Russian lodge to operate freely again was the Harmony Lodge. And that did not happen until as recently as 1992.
In the 20th century, Freemasonry would suffer not only the persecution from the Bolsheviks, but also from the Nazis. It was in this century that the term Jewish Masonic was coined, and the most daring conspiracy theories saw the light. How much truth there is in all this? How much is straightforward anti-Semitism? Why has Freemasonry attracted throughout the ages the wrath of established powers like a lightning rod? The 20th century was not kind to Freemasonry. During the communist era, it was banned in all of Eastern Europe and the Soviet Union. Its lodges dissolved, its libraries destroyed, its members pursued and imprisoned. It fared no better in Nazi Germany.
In Mein Kampf, Hitler proclaimed that Freemasonry had been infiltrated by the Jews, and that it was now their instrument. He wrote that the pacifist feelings and the paralysis of the nationalist instinct were the result of Masonic manipulations. He gave early impetus to what would soon become a long list of anti-Semitic accusations against Freemasonry. Hitler dissolved all the lodges in Germany and accused Freemasonry of conspiring with the Jews to establish a world republic, similar to what the Illuminati had postulated more than 100 years before. In 1935, Goebbels accused 300 members of the Jewish race and Masonic conspirators of having allowed the USSR to enter the League of Nations. 2 years later, he opened an anti-Masonic exhibition that displayed incriminatory objects. In the Nazi concentration camps, Freemasons had to wear a distinctive red inverted triangle. It is estimated that in Nazi Germany and its occupied territories, between 80 and 200,000 Freemasons were murdered. In 1924, in Italy, Mussolini decreed that fascists had to choose between being fascists or Freemasons, and the following year he ordered the dissolution of Freemasonry.
The supposed relationship between Judaism and Freemasonry that both Nazis and fascists decried was never proven, but served to stoke racial hatred. The fact remains that Freemasonry was born in the very heart of Christian societies, and only after a number of centuries had passed did it accept Jews as well as Muslims or anyone who believed in a superior being. A detail that went unnoticed or was simply ignored by both Hitler and Mussolini.
Franco's Spain was also an important setting for anti-Masonic persecutions. During the dictatorship of Francisco Franco, Freemasons were tortured and executed without trial all over the country. Freemasonry only became legal again after the death of the dictator in 1975. In more recent times, Saddam Hussein introduced the death penalty in Iraq for those who promote or support Zionist principles, including Freemasonry.
What does this tell us about Freemasonry? Judging on the quality of its enemies, there's not much to add. But what about Freemasonry today?
At present, it is estimated there are still between 4 and 6 million active Masons distributed among some 100,000 lodges worldwide. Most lodges are now a sort of social club, where charity, ancestral rites, secrets, curious clothes, and even bingo competitions and theme parties coexist. Masons no longer hide their membership to the Brotherhood, and even boast bumper stickers that clearly identify them. Most even have their own web pages. They also donate huge amounts of money to charity. Their main problem today is that the young have little or no interest in joining their ranks. Perhaps Freemasonry is being defeated by time. Its ancient liturgy, its moral principles, its opposition to religious authorities who've become less and less important as time goes by, sits uneasily in a culture attuned to postmodernism and the internet, virtual games, individualistic cults, or the insatiable consumer society where the advancement of a man and spirituality have little place. Perhaps their waning also has to do with their reluctance to accept women outside ancillary lodges for ladies. A stubborn archaism that still persists.
Perhaps the last and greatest Masonic accomplishment of the 20th century has been the routing of Hitler and Nazism. Roosevelt, Truman, Churchill, King George VI, General Bradley, MacArthur and Marshall, all of them were Masons. Many years have passed since then. However, there are still some events that can be ascribed to Freemasonry, flickers of life that tell us that the giant may only be sleeping.
In 1997, British Labour MP Chris Mullin launched a bitter attack on Freemasonry. Mullin was convinced that police Freemasons bestowed special privileges on criminal Freemasons. There was a lot of hysteria in the British press, but in the end nothing was ever proven. In the National Assembly of Wales, it has been obligatory since 1999 for parliamentary Freemasons to reveal their status. Judges and the police have been asked to do so voluntarily.
So if Freemasonry today is just a tawdry social club, why did Saddam Hussein persecute them, while in the United Kingdom they forced Freemason policemen and judges to reveal themselves as Masons? Two countries ideologically at loggerheads who've recently waged war once shared a common enemy. Is it simply because Freemasons are an easy target for politicians?
Freemasonry has always been characterized by its shape-shifting abilities, for having a low profile, and for going underground at the right time. This strategy has reaped them splendid rewards for centuries. New names, new ways, new members. It wouldn't be at all impossible that they could be applying those same tactics today.
Can a society that has influenced the most important events and attracted key historical figures simply fade out of existence? Is it possible that this new silence, this apparent senility, is simply concealing a change of plans and strategies? Our daily life is often affected by decisions that are unknown to us, and Freemasons might still be behind them, without us even suspecting it. Not to mention the powerful manipulation exercised by the media, much of which is in the hands of Masonic brethren. Is it not right to wonder through which channels Freemasonry's subtle messages reach us?